You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to The Spirit Dimension with your host, Kerry Greenaway, right here on Parasearch Radio.
A good evening and welcome to the Spirit Dimension. My name is Kerry Greenaway and tonight I have a very, very special guest in the studio as always. His name is Ashley Thorpe and I met this amazing gentleman a little while ago when we went to see the book review evening at the College of Cyclical Research. And his name is, as said before, Ashley Thorpe, and he's done a film called Borley Rectory. Good evening, Ashley. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yes, I'm very good, thank you. So tonight we're going to talk all about this project that you've been working on for quite a long time. How long has it been?
Oh, at least 70 years now, I think.
It might feel like that.
It does feel like that, yeah. No, it was, I'm trying to think, the first draft of the script was written in 2011. And then it languished in development hell for about 2 years until we did some crowdfunding. So it started 6 years ago, but we didn't really start kind of filming and animating in earnest until about early 2014. And since then, it's been every evening and weekend. So it's been quite the labour, prolonged labour.
It's been an all-encompassing project for you, hasn't it?
Life devouring, I'd say.
Now, can you just tell me your background? Because you're not actually a filmmaker, are you? You're actually a graphic person. I don't know the right terminology for what you do.
Dilettante. No, I actually came into filmmaking through illustration, really. And I studied film just out of curiosity at university and then realised that animation was quite a nice way that I could blend my love of story writing and illustration and just kind of make my images move, really. And it just became more and more of a focus. I started doing the other things less, and illustration kind of took a back seat as the animation took over about 10 years ago. And it started off with shorts. Short films, and they were very much kind of obsessional films about neglected British myths, things like the Scarecrow, the Highwayman, and Screaming Skull, Hairy Hands, kind of Devon ghost stories and things. And then my life was completely consumed by it all. Really, people liked them and they wanted more of them. So here we are.
Here we are. Yes, we are here. Certainly we are. Now, so what is it about the ghost thing that captured you initially? How did you first get into all of that side of things? What was that first inspiration for you?
The ghosts and things, yeah. How did I get into ghosts? I think a lot of it came from... It was a mixture of my mum and dad's interest, really. My mum was always very interested in ghost stories and those kind of the supernatural side of things. And my dad used to work away from home quite a lot, so I'd get to sit up late with her and just watch all sorts of, Tales of the Unexpected, those sorts of things with her. I'm that old. And my dad had an interest in... he used to talk to me a lot about things like Jonathan Miller's take on Whistle and I'll Come For You and those sorts of things that really caught his imagination when he'd seen them on television. Mm-hmm. So I kind of grew up in a funny mix of people that were interested in it in a day-to-day way and people that were interested in it from an artistic bent, really. Mm-hmm. And it was really the Usborne Book of Ghosts where I started to identify particular stories and particular myths, and that was certainly where I remember discovering Borley Rectory.
Yes.
It's a childhood thing, very much so.
And Borley is sort of one of the very first that you do tend to come across when you're just doing general reading and talking about the traditional ghost story, isn't it? And it was such a huge part of how things developed. I mean, Harry Price, as we know, was a huge part of this story, isn't he? Yeah,
very much so, yeah.
But it didn't start with Harry. It started before that, didn't it?
Well, yeah. It's I mean, from my reading, and I did quite a lot of reading, but I still don't consider myself an expert necessarily. Maybe part of that's been numbed from my mind. I don't know, but it was very much a Victorian thing initially. And this idea that there'd been an existing monastery, or that there was an existing kind of Georgian house that burnt down, and then the Reverend Bull built the rectory as it became famous on top of those ruins, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And there seemed to be legends in place by the time that people started talking about the Borley ghosts, and it flourished really, and these stories just developed and grew, and the various occupants at the rectory just seemed to embellish them. With each family that stayed there seemed to add something new. And then obviously in 1929, when the Daily Mirror got involved with it, they just exploded it nationwide as this place that was later got christened the most haunted house in England. And then that then leads into Price arriving, and the rest is history. It became so notorious,
as they say. Now, where did when you first started researching Borley for your project, how did that manifest itself? How did that start for you? I mean, you knew the story, you knew all that side of it, but then obviously you must have gone away and done a hell of a lot more work on that to write your screenplay.
I did, but it's funny, really, because the first thing I did was, rather than go to Price's books, the very first thing that I went back and looked at was the Usborne Book of Ghosts. I went back and dug out my children's book from when I was 8, because and I suddenly realised that one of the main things that had made this particular thing so interesting was that it told the story in very visual fashion. Mm-hmm. That it was almost like a series of vignettes. So it broke the whole story, which is quite a dense, complicated story over a long period of time with lots of characters, and it just broke them down into very eye-catching images. And I thought, well, that's a very good place to start getting the screenplay together. So I actually started off with a children's book, and I still think, even though obviously it's not a children's film, it still has that sensibility where I thought about it and I wrote about it visually, and then embellished it with a narration that was culled from things like Harry Price's writings, discussions I had with people like Stephen Volk and Roger Clark, and then I had a huge amount of input from Paul Adams and Eddie Brazil, who I could just go to and say, look, I'm about to put this bit in here in the script. Am I completely barking up the wrong tree? Have I got my characters confused? Have I, is it even the right year? And I cross-check as much as possible with Paul and Eddie, and they go, no, that's right, but that's the wrong room. It looked like this. And then, I'd go back and tweak accordingly. Mm-hmm. But it was very much, and I storyboarded the whole thing too. I wrote a very loose screenplay, and then I went off and I storyboarded the whole thing, which took about 3 months to storyboard it in between, childcare and grown-up stuff like work.
Yeah, the boring bits.
The boring bits that keep you alive and keep electricity in the house, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know that feeling. It's like while you're being distracted by the day job, you're always thinking about your projects, though, aren't you?
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah, absolutely. And this was it. I mean, it would have been wonderful if I could have spent the last 6 years just working on Borley as like most filmmakers, they get given a certain amount of time and a certain amount of money, and they get paid to work on it. But with this, it was a labour of love. It was made in the evenings with an infant daughter, animated next to a baby monitor, very much so, and it really was evenings and weekends. And as soon as my daughter was in bed, it was back to Borley. So the funny thing, and people have said actually, that it is a film that has this weird middle of the night feel about it. And that's because it was all animated between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. for 3 years. Yeah. So it has that weird half asleep feel about it.
Well, I've seen the trailer for this, and I would not say it's a half asleep thing. It definitely keeps you on. Even the trailer just kept me on the edge of my seat. It's incredibly atmospheric how you've done this film. And what you've done is you've illustrated the backgrounds, haven't you? And then you've got actors overlaid on top of that. Yeah. Which sounds a little strange, but trust me, guys, I'm going to share the trailer into the chat room. You need to see it because it looks absolutely awesome how Ashley has actually managed to do this. I'm actually in awe of your work on this.
Thanks.
I really am. As I say, I was blown away just by the trailer, so I can't wait to see the full feature.
Yeah, it's transformed quite a bit since then because it's got a proper sound mix and it's got a lovely score for it. So the sound has completely transformed it.
The whole process of filmmaking, I would imagine, in regards to any projects that you take on, it's loads of different things being pulled together to create the final product. Which part of that did you find the hardest?
I think financially surviving while I was trying to make it, I think. I suppose that the hardest part actually was not the animation as such. One of the hardest parts of the whole thing was having so many interesting people involved in it, and the logistics of trying to get everyone together to make it. That was a hard thing because in the past, all the sort of the films that I'd made, they were made with very much friends and family, and there might be someone special that we get in to do a narration at the end, and it's all quite easy to organise. Whereas at this, because we had people like Reece Shearsmith involved. After we did the first crowdfunder, it was nearly 4 months until we could pin him down for 2 days to work with us, which is something that was really hard to explain to people. Going, why haven't you started? Why haven't you started? Where's the film? Why isn't it finished? So we haven't started yet. We've got to get hold of the actors. It took a long time to it really was a military operation because there are scenes in Borley where you've got 6 people sat around a seance table, mm-hmm. and you've got to get those 6 people there on the same day to act together in a room, Yeah. And that was the hardest thing. The actual animation was a kind of a financial bind, and it was hard with my time and juggling work and family and the rest of it. But in terms of animation, I love animating, and I'm quite happy sitting there into the dead of night doing it. Yeah. But the production of just trying to tie all these different ends together and get a narration done, all those things. And there's no way I would have been able to do any of it without my producer, Tom Atkinson, he took on so much of that for me. Because at first, I just could not cope. It was too much. It was hard enough just being a working dad. Yeah. But then to have all that kind of admin on top, it was insane. So luckily, who I'd worked with before, actually, Tom came in and just said, look, you look after the creative and I'll sort everything out. And he's still helping me do that to this day because Borley would not have seen the light of day without it. It really wouldn't have happened.
Oh, that's amazing because it's allowed you to actually do the bit you do best, which is, like you said, the creativity side of it.
Yeah, and I can handle that side of it because, I storyboard it, I plan it all out, I know exactly what I need from each shoot, I know how to get on with the backgrounds. So that side of things, I'm quite happy spinning those plates, but with everything else on top, like organising the props and who needs to be where on what day and what studio we need to book and the equipment we need to book and all that side of things, it's just absolutely, utterly overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's one of these processes. If you screw it up and you drop the ball once, potentially you could, your whole shoot could be a disaster. You could spend months planning it. But if I haven't had enough sleep the night before and I forget to get the camera,
oh gosh,
disaster. So yeah, it's nice having like a core crew of the two of us that are just poking each other just to make sure that is that working? Have we got everything we need? Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's still there now. He's still double checking all the renders, sending them out to festivals as we speak. So
yeah, because you've had your first screenings as well, haven't you? Now
the very first one, yeah, we had a launch screening in London, which was on the 23rd, I think it was. And yeah, that went really well. That was kind of cast and crew sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the reception to it was overwhelming, I have to say. People seem to really like it. It was weird bringing this thing out into the light, actually. It felt like this weird little thing up in the attic.
Yeah, because you'd worked on it for so long and it's such a personal level as well. You put your heart, like you said, a labour of love, put your heart and soul into it. Was you nervous on that first screening?
I was, but I was nervous. Weirdly, I wasn't nervous about people liking it. I was more nervous, and this is the filmmaker, the OCD side. I was more worried that the bloody thing wouldn't play. I was worried the sound was going to cut out halfway through, or the equipment at the venue was going to break. I was more worried about that. So you kind of sit there, gripping the edge of your chair, thinking, just play to the end. Please play to the end. Because it doesn't matter how many times you test everything, there's always room for error, always. So,
oh gosh, yeah.
It was great. I got to the end and thought, oh, thank God it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was people were coming up going, wow, I didn't know anything like that. That was great. So, it was, yeah, very encouraging.
So, let's go back to talk a little bit more about the case itself. Mm-hmm. Now, you talked about, obviously, the Harry Price years. You've covered a little bit, quite a lot in there. What did you think about it? When, you've researched it, you've looked into it, you've had all this time looking at this particular case. What is your feeling about it? Was it an actual haunting, do you think? Or do you think it was a manifestation from the build-up of people that had lived in there through stories?
Yeah, I was very careful not to draw too many conclusions in the film. I wanted to encourage people to be intrigued by it, just the way that I was with that first children's book, because that didn't really come to any conclusions either. I wanted to encourage people to be fascinated by it and go off and do reading of their own. And I think deep down I do wonder whether there was something to it, but at the same time I do also wonder whether, because it was a place that drew so many eccentric characters into its folds, I do wonder whether there is an element of the expectation of a place. If you're told a house is haunted, the creak in the night ceases to be a creak in the middle of the night.
Yes.
And then if you go even further and you're saying, the ghost of the Blue Lady walked that landing, then when you hear the creak in the middle of the night, it's not just something odd, it becomes the Blue Lady. And I think because the legend of Borley built up so quickly and so powerfully by so many different people, I do wonder whether there was this element of, it's almost, what's that folkloric term? Was it ostension? Mm-hmm. Whereby if you tell a myth enough, it gains a life of its own because people almost start making this thing come true. And I think there's an element of that in there. I think that it was a place that drew eccentric characters into its mix, and I think that they brought their own strange personalities and eccentricities into there. But then at the same time, I do wonder whether there was something interesting going on that they fed upon. So I haven't really come to any concrete conclusions at the end. I tend to think that there was obviously something really interesting going on at Borley Rectory. Whether it was as cut and dry as the way it's explained in the legends, I don't think so. And I think that, Price didn't seem to be someone who would be very easily convinced about things. He was much more famous as a skeptic initially. There's all these criticisms whether he smelt money and whether he thought that if I publicise this thing as being this monster of haunted houses that he could benefit from it. And obviously he did, but at the same time he must have known that by putting himself too far out there that he was going to damage his own credibility anyway. So it's whether he really believed that he would have been that naive to think, well, if I just come forward and say this is the most haunted building ever, that people would just lap it up. I don't know. The more you read about it, I find the more difficult I find it to discuss it in black and white terms. I think that there's so many different personalities pulling in different directions in that place. And if you look at someone like Harry Price compared to someone like Marianne Foyster, she was a labyrinth, so many curious things going on with her. And you've got all those personalities in one place. So, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you could make I felt it in the film, even with the feature length, I felt as if I was skimming over a lot of it because you just can't cover everything in depth. Somebody could easily make like one of those HBO 12-part, 12-part hour-long series, and only just about then do it justice.
Yeah.
So much going on in there.
Yeah, there is so much to this story of Borley Rectory. We have spoken to Eddie Brazil before now about Borley, and he's a fascinating wealth of information character. I absolutely adore that man. He's absolutely brilliant. Now, I'm assuming you visited Borley.
Do you know what? No.
What?
I haven't. No.
Oh, I'm shocked.
I know. I mean, I live in Exeter, so I'm on the other side of the other coast, really.
Mm.
So I'm all the way down in Devon. So to be honest, I haven't had the chance. I haven't had the time, really. I'd like to go at some point. Julian Sands, funny enough, was saying that he really wanted to go to Borley with me and just kind of soak up the atmosphere and wanted to see the church and whatnot. But no, I initially thought about it, and then with everything else, never had the chance, never had the time.
I am shocked by that. Being as you've been so involved in this case. I mean, I know the actual building itself isn't there anymore, is it?
No, long gone.
So it is only the village and the church, really, that's there. And it's very small. It's a tiny little place. And when I very first started in this field, it was one of the very first places, like, you've got to go to Borley because it's, for me, it's not too far. So it was one of those places that I went to. And I was actually quite surprised at how small this place is in village terms.
Yeah.
And I kind of was expecting the big mansion and was most disappointed when I got... This is where you need to do your research before you visit a location. Because it wasn't there. I was quite disappointed by that. But it has got a very particular atmosphere to the place. But other than that, there's not a lot else there. I mean, like you say, you can't see the rectory itself. You can see the church, the churchyard. But other than that, that's kind of it.
Absolutely, there isn't. And I think if there'd been ruins there, I would have gone.
Yeah.
But the fact that I knew that there wasn't, it would have been quite useful for me to go and have a look and have a look around the churchyard and things, and also have a look at the countryside around and the surroundings, because I just had to invent all of that in my film. Just imagine what it looked like, that view across that field and all this kind of thing. Whereas I would have gone there and done the research, but it's it's just too far away. I just couldn't get there.
It's one of those, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't get there, and I really couldn't, just sort of justify it. And ultimately, pretty much the last about 3 years or so, I've pretty much been, I've just been, raising my daughter and doing bits of work at home and making the film. I've not been out exploring or adventuring much at all. It's been all that stuff can start now. Now that the film's out of the way, I can do that now. But at the time, it was I was kind of like I was like a house mum really, but making a film in the evenings.
Yeah, a Borley Rectory hermit even.
Hermit. Yeah, very much so.
It is difficult to juggle real life against your passions. I find this quite a lot with work that I do. So it is quite difficult to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is very hard. I mean, I've been quite lucky in a way because, my hand was forced about, I think it was 2009, 2010, something like that, where I'd just been doing like customer service work, just doing bits and pieces here, there, just, doing a 9-5, and I was made redundant. And it forced my hand at a time when I just started venturing out into doing bits of freelance animation and going into primary schools and teaching kids how to do stop motion animation for fun. Cool. And my hand was forced. And at the time, I remember my wife said, "Well, you've got a choice now. You can go and get another job you hate, or we could try and make a push of this and see what happens. Can you make it as an animator, and can you do this stuff?" And that's exactly what we did. And it was really hard initially, but eventually I got established as an animator and as someone who teaches animation to both adults and kids as well. So it came along at a good time actually, because with the birth of my daughter, it meant I could actually be a work-at-home dad. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy.
No,
it's
not. Anybody who says that, it's not easy.
No, it's not. No, sometimes it was really hard, which is why it ended up being, I became very motivated because I had no choice. Especially when my daughter was really small, you'd work when she napped. So there was none of this waiting for your muses, waiting for your inspiration to strike. It was, she's asleep. I am now working for 2 hours until she wakes up. Yeah. And you just have to get on with it. So it was good training in that respect. But it was, we're still spinning plates and trying to make things work out. But it's working. And Proof has somehow finally got a feature film made working in that environment. So
that's
much
amazing.
to Bramble.
And what an amazing wife.
She is amazing. Yeah, she's absolutely amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of people would have, and rightly so, actually, they would have stood back and said, well, this is an insane thing for you to think about doing. It's not like being trained up as a plumber where you're just going to walk into work. This is nuts. It's such a tough industry. Yeah. But she had complete faith, and she just said, you've got to keep going. And even when things got really hard, like the last couple of years, things got really difficult. Yeah. And she, there were times when I was ready just to jack it all in. And she was absolutely saying, almost Yoda-like, saying if you give up now, you'll betray everything that we fought for. So no, absolutely, kept me going right to the end. Bless her. Yeah,
definitely kudos to that lady, because as I say, it's she pushed you to go freelance and to follow your dreams, and that is something amazing to have in a partner. So what is her take on all of this? Is she glad she's got her husband back, or is she saying, find a new project?
I think there's a bit of both. I think she's thrilled that we got to the end of it. I think there's also going to be the element of she works late, so she gets back quite late at night, and she's used to coming in and seeing me here, so we're sat working away. Yeah. So I think she's been happy that the film's done, and we can just see what we can do with it and where we can go with it. But I'm sure the second that the nights start kicking in while I'm pacing up and down, twiddling my thumbs, not knowing what to do with myself and annoying her, I'm sure that the novelty will wear off pretty quick.
She's probably researching your next project right now. Right, what can I find for a nice little story for him to do next?
Yeah, find something to keep him busy and keep him out of my way.
Or I'll have another child. That'll keep him busy.
Oh, Lord. Too much work.
Now, your daughter's incredibly young, isn't she?
Yeah, she's 3, so she's a Borley baby, pretty much.
She certainly is a little Borley baby, isn't she?
Yeah.
So was she sat on your knee while you were doing your work?
Some of it, yeah, genuinely some of it. I mean, there's some really funny pictures of, especially during the early days, where I'm sat here and her high chair's next to me. You know, she's sat there eating porridge, or I'm feeding her porridge while working on the film. You know, it was like having a co-pilot next to me. So, yeah,
a messy little co-pilot.
a very messy co-pilot, yeah. But no, she was. You know, I think we found out actually that she was due on the day that I filmed the video for the first crowdfunder. So that's why if ever you watched the first video for the first crowdfunder, I have this strange, faraway look in my eye because I knew that Sue was going to find out whether she was pregnant or not by the time I'd finished the shoot.
Oh wow!
So I look very distracted. I look like I'm really struggling to remember my lines that day.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that story. So going back to the process of Borley and the screenwriting, where do you start with that? Do you just start from a point and it develops around it, or do you do all your research first and then you know exactly how you're going to progress the film?
I did, once I thought about the key visuals and the key scenes I really wanted to animate, I pretty much did a load of reading and I just made notes. And I created a very simple kind of skeleton form for it. Just key scenes, almost created like a very simple timeline, really. And I was adamant that I didn't want to just focus on one particular era. I think that's one thing and rightly so, I think that's one thing a lot of people who've been trying to adapt the Borley story into films, especially films where they present themselves as works of fiction or drama. It's so overwhelming, they don't know where to start. So they'll tend to take one particular era, like the Marianne era, because it's kind of the juiciest one.
Yeah.
And I didn't really want to do that. I very much wanted to be like the Osborne Book of Ghosts. I wanted to start at the beginning and work my way right the way through until Price died. Mm-hmm. And I just sketched it out. Right, what can we do? What are the key moments we need to discuss so that this thing feels like it's growing right up to the point where, you know, the place burnt down. So it has its own sense of kind of a proper narrative, because when you're reading the book, it all feels kind of here, there, and everywhere, and people come and go, and it's a bit confusing. So it's finding a way to make it feel a little bit more linear, as if it's almost kind of taking the ghost's point of view, really.
Yeah.
And making it build like that, and that the intruders in the story are not the ghosts. The intruders in my take really are the people who come and go, and then it reaches its conclusion when, you know, the rectory is kind of burnt down, and Price pretty much joins the ghosts as one of them, really. So it's a different kind of take in a way.
Very much different kind of take to the story. Now, there are some really strange stories surrounding Borley.
Yeah.
I read one which was about an artist that was in the gardens, and she was painting the Borley Rectory. And she had a weird encounter with, it's called the Bug of Borley Rectory. Did you come across that one?
I did, and for a while I was considering using it. Because one of the other things I discovered while I was researching and when I was animating was I started, sometimes it almost felt like an almost Lovecraftian story. You could imagine it being, Borley Rectory being an H.P. Lovecraft story with these investigators going in and bizarre things happening to them, and some of them becoming a little bit mad. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it had these weird, not all of them were these kind of gothic manifestations, that there was these weird creatures. And I did wonder whether to put in more stuff like that. But it was one of those things that got snipped in the end because I had such a volume of stuff to try and include. I thought that, animating these weird little insects, I might be going off on a tangent. As fun as it would have been, it would have been fun, but I just thought,
gosh, yeah.
I'm going off the rails here.
I mean, trying to include too much, and like you can go down so many different avenues with this story, can't you? So it is completely. Keeping very focused and concentrating on exactly your vision that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you and the other thing, I didn't want it to become too muddled because there's so much in there, and I could quite happily just carry on animating it on and on and on and on. There was so much stuff I thought about putting in there, but ultimately I didn't. Yeah. People have been patient enough with the crowdfunder as it was, so I wanted to get it to a conclusion. Mm-hmm. But also, I did kind of want it to leave people wanting a little bit, so that they would go off and that they would do their own reading. So that it's an introduction to it. I would never describe my film as, the definitive take on Borley, because I think that's yet to be made. I think somebody will make it. And I think they'll really struggle to do it as a feature. I think they'll have to do it as a TV show, like an ongoing thing.
Yeah, like a mini-series.
Absolutely, yeah. You almost need a Breaking Bad length take on it. Yeah. It needs to be something that really goes into depth with each family and the relationship between the families and their heritage, and even down to silly little things. What novels were they reading? Just to give it a kind of historical context. I don't think you can just slap it together and expect the drama to work because it's so dense and complicated. It needs a lot of investment of time. Yeah.
Would you be prepared to be part of that project?
Well...
Are you sick to death of Borley now?
Do you know what? I think I wouldn't want to sit and animate it. I'd never get to the end of it. I'd be an old man. There'd be like generations of me still doing it in the future, I think. I'd be interested in developing it. I think that would be interesting to say, right, well, we haven't just got an hour and a half to talk about it. Why don't 12 episodes? We've got 12 hours. How would you break up those 12 hours into conveying the story and everything that was going on around, not just in the rectory, but around the rectory and all these sorts of things. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to sit with somebody like a Stephen Bulk quality writer, just saying, how would you do it? If you had to make a series of this, how would you do it? Would you break it into thirds, quarters? Would you have a particular emphasis? It'd be interesting to see what could be done with it. But it would have to be expensive, so it would probably end up being one of those Netflix things, wouldn't it? Have proper funding behind it.
That is the trouble we have, isn't it, in regards to getting this kind of project out and about. I mean, it's the funding that is incredibly difficult to get hold of to actually make these kind of projects. And they're so important because they're keeping these stories alive.
Yeah, I mean, I was initially... I mean, it's odd, really, because I didn't have to struggle at all for the funding of anything else that I'd made. It just seemed... I think maybe my ideas were unusual enough that they went, oh, that's a bit different. Yeah, we'll do that. Mm-hmm. And I really took it for granted, stupidly, that with Borley, the people were going to go, oh, and they'd be really excited about it. But we initially did have interest from a number of different production companies, and we even had a contact with a producer at Channel 4, and we were chatting to a person who was running Shooting Gallery at the time, and we thought, brilliant, that's it, sorted, nothing to worry about now. We can just get on with developing it. I started storyboarding it, and it all fell to bits, all of it. All the funding fell to bits. The producer moved on somewhere else, and I don't know what they do at Channel 4, but they didn't seem to tell the next person that took their job what we discussed. And that was the end of it. And we were back to square one. We'd recorded Julian's narration, but we had no film to put it over. We just had a narration, and that was it. Brilliant. use your imagination, folks.
Yeah.
It's going to look great. Yeah, so it was absolutely scuppered, and we were back to the drawing board, and it took us really about, Tom and myself had to carry on working for a living and doing other things, whilst desperately trying to get this thing back off the ground. And it was then that we resorted to the crowdfunding, because we just thought, it's never going to happen. We keep getting all these slightly half-assed promises from people, and nothing's coming forth, so we're just going to have to take it into our own hands, and we're going to have to pimp the hell out of it to make this thing get made.
Yeah.
And now it's nice, because now that people are saying, it's really interesting, all the rest of it, and it's exciting to be part of that sort of response. But at the same time, it does make you want to step back and say, then why was it so hard to get made?
Yeah.
If there is, I was saying at the time that there's a hunger for this type of material.
Yeah.
Why was there no help, no interest from the arts councils or anything like that? Any of the local initiatives for funding or grants or anything? There was absolutely nothing. So you literally just had to go out on the internet with a cap and beg for change, and that was the only way to get it made.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. It's incredibly frustrating. As any kind of artist, to have to resort to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's. I don't feel as a filmmaker or I tend to think of myself as a craftsman rather than an artist. I always think artist brings with it a level of pretension. I think I feel more comfortable being called a craftsman, somebody that makes something.
Yeah.
But I don't think there is this. That we should necessarily have this right to go out and say, I want to do this, so you're going to give me the money. Because, in what other field do you get to do that? You don't.
No, that's very true.
But at the same time, there is supposed to be this idea of the arts are supposed to be subsidised to some extent for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah.
And especially in England or in the UK, should I say, that we have such a rich tradition, such a heritage of this type of material, the supernatural, the fantastic. There's so much of it, and it should be celebrated. And it's not really, not at grassroots. It's not certainly.
No, it definitely isn't. It's a common theme talking to authors and magazines.
But they're all skin.
Everybody's skin. Yeah, and one person once said to me when we was talking about the radio side of it was like, don't ever expect to become rich through it. You're never going to get rich through it. And I was not doing it for that.
No, and you shouldn't. And this is the thing. I mean, and Borley wasn't even made to think, this is it, folks, we're going to make our millions here. If I'd been thinking that, I would have made another knockoff zombie movie that you could sell and it'd be on a Tesco shelf by the end of the month. It's if I wanted to get rich quick, I certainly wouldn't have done this. It's just about wanting a particular thing to be made, and it's my freelance work. It's the commercial work that I do that I make the money from.
Yeah.
And I'm quite lucky actually because although I do have to do the graphics and animations for health and safety videos and things like that, that's the stuff that keeps the money coming in. But I'm quite lucky also that I do get approached to do things like horror film titles and those sorts of things as well. So, mustn't grumble.
No, we can't grumble because at the bottom line of it all is we do it because we have a passion for it.
Absolutely.
And, a huge interest in it and almost a little dog
lunacy.
With a bone. Yeah, I will go with dog with a bone kind of tenacity.
Yeah, okay. Tenacity, not lunacy. I always get those two muddled up.
I know, there's a fine line I feel between that.
I think I might have crossed my line.
Oh my goodness me. So you're actually doing screenings now?
Yeah.
For
Which
Borley.
still doesn't quite feel real, but it's happening.
Yeah, so where can people see this? Where can we go and actually watch your movie?
Right, let me have a think. Well, the first one that's coming up is this coming Sunday in Manchester as part of Grimm's Fest.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, the following weekend it's showing in Belfast as part of Cinema Magic. The weekend after that, which I think is the 20th and the 21st, on the 20th of October it's at Celluloid Screams in Sheffield. And then there's a folk horror revival festival going on in Edinburgh. And Borley's going to be part of that on the Sunday the 21st.
Cool.
And there's lots of other ones lined up as well. I think it's playing at Dead of Night as well, the same night it's playing in Edinburgh. And we've got some American ones that are turning up as well. It's playing in, I think it might be the 14th of October. I think it's playing in Telluride, in Colorado, and New York shortly after that. So it is slowly getting out there.
Brilliant.
Just amazing, really.
Slowly getting out there, and I'm sure plenty more screenings will be shown around the country. Have you thought about doing screenings like in a town hall for people to be able to go to rather than the festivals?
I haven't yet. No, I haven't yet. I'm resisting doing one in Borley in case the council lynch me. Just get carried out and thrown in a pyre somewhere. It's like, oh, you're stirring up the trouble again.
Oh, there you go. Wicker Man. That's your next project.
That's it. Yeah. Burning all the filmmakers. No, I haven't really. I mean, at the moment, we've been just trying to get it into as many festivals as possible. We've got the reward downloads of the people that supported us going out soon.
Cool.
Very, very soon. And then we're going to be looking into getting it out in the market, actually selling it, and getting it out on DVD and Blu-ray and all the rest of it. And the good thing is we've had a few people coming forward already, and they came forward just on the strength of previews and things. So we're quietly confident that we will be able to sell it, and in which case it will be something you just got to go into a shop and buy, as opposed to trying to seek it out in a scout hut in Aberystwyth.
True.
It'll be out there.
That's brilliant news, because as I say, I can't wait to see it. And it's from the very first time I saw the trailer, which wasn't, as you said, a finished product at that point. It looked absolutely amazing, incredibly atmospheric, very different how you would normally see a movie. It's, it is, because you've got this crossover between the animation and the real actors. It's absolutely fascinating. And I know the people I was with on that evening were very excited about this, incredibly excited about this, because it's so different, so atmospheric. And it's the traditional ghost story, and it involves Harry Price, which, is a starting point for most paranormal investigators. I don't think many people in this planet don't know who Harry Price is, in the paranormal world at least. Now, he is a very enigmatic character himself, and I've been having this discussion quite often with people, and I'm going to ask you, Ashley,
right?
If someone came to you with a case of a talking mongoose, would you investigate that?
How could you not? You'd have to be curious at least, wouldn't you? You'd have to be curious.
Well, I have had this discussion quite a lot, and I was very shocked, because I really did sit on the fence of, don't be ridiculous, a talking mongoose, honestly, giving spiritual messages. Anyway, I've been proven very wrong, because everybody else in the paranormal field is saying exactly the same as you. And then I got asked,
especially one called Jeff.
Yeah. And then I got asked whether my opinion had changed after listening to everybody else in the field, and what lesson I'd learned from that. And the lesson I learned was not to discount anything.
No, exactly. Because you never know. I think that's the key, isn't it? It's about remaining kind of open-minded, and even if it was a case of, well, even if it isn't the mongoose, then where are these messages coming from?
True.
So, but yeah, I think I'd be intrigued. I wouldn't be able to help myself. Talking mongoose, you say? I'm in.
Yeah. And that was the consensus with most of the people, well, in fact, all of the people I asked, apart from myself. Maybe I am being a little close-minded on that one. And I have put that out in public now. So, Mr. Ashley Nib, you can stop nagging me on that particular point. So going forward, you've finished Borley. It must feel very strange not to be working on the creative process and actually now going into the marketing process of this. How has that sat with you?
It's been interesting. It's still quite early days with that, really, because at the moment we're still we've still got these daily things, double checking all the files, and all the festivals want slightly different formats to screen it. So, we're still having to muck about with renders and making sure the sound plays properly. So we're still mucking about with the technical side of it. But it is a very different. It's a very interesting feeling. It's going to be strange actually being sat there in Manchester at the weekend and just purely being there to discuss it, as opposed to being anywhere out of the house and it to do with production. It's going to be strange, very strange. But it's fun getting the film out there and just trying to find the right avenues and channels for it to see if we can actually get it to a like a wide audience. And I think with Reese's involvement in it, I think with the subject material, I think it's got a good chance of getting bought by a company and distributed. So I'm hoping it will be a case of being able to wander in and just buy it in the shop.
That would be awesome.
That'd be good.
That would be weird, walking into a shop and seeing your project on the shelf.
It will be very strange, yeah. I mean, it was weird when Tales of Halloween came out, because I did the opening titles for that, and that was great fun with the kids, actually, just walking into H&B, and just seeing this thing on display at Halloween, and saying, yeah, my dad did 3 minutes of that. Only 3 minutes, mine, but they are at the start.
I bet they're important 3 minutes, though.
Well, of course.
Of course they are.
Yes, of course. So, it's going to be interesting. It's also going to be really weird to walk into a shop and see something Borley Rectory written on the front of it, because when I started researching it, it was something that was very famous with my generation. It was in all the ghost books and things in the 70s and early 80s, but then unless you were very specifically interested in the paranormal, I met a lot of people that had never heard of Borley Rectory. Never heard of it. Whereas for me, it was just in all these books that I read growing up. And I didn't necessarily consider myself an expert or a delegate in any way. But it's just you couldn't escape it. It was mentioned by everything.
Yeah.
It was the big one. It was like the British Amateurville. It's like you must have heard of it.
Yeah.
But there were loads of people that, no, they didn't have the faintest idea what I was talking about. So it'll be interesting now to get this little revival out there for people to have heard of it again. And get people reading again, and never know. Hopefully, Paul and Eddie will benefit out of it as well, because they'll go, there were lots of things that Ashley didn't answer. We're going to have to go read their books.
Yes, definitely, because they wrote the definitive guide for Borley Rectory, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And people should go and read their stuff and talk, go along to their evenings and talk to them, and really get under the hood and find out what was really going on there. Because mine's very much an introduction. It's almost like a beginner's guide kind of thing to get people intrigued. And then after that, go read a book.
Well, I have read their book, and I can honestly say, again, fantastic piece of work and research. That's one thing Eddie and Paul are fantastic at, is really researching. I mean, we was at the book launch, wasn't we, of The Enigma of Rosalie, and read that book after, the launch. And again, it always blows me away, the level of research that these guys do for their work. So it must have been invaluable having them on board to help you with your project. Oh,
hugely. Yeah, hugely valuable. Because, because I wanted to tell the story visually, and I wanted it, it was always going to have a certain degree of artistic license, but I wanted it wherever possible to at least feel like the Rectory, or for it to be at least vaguely accurate, as best as I could. Yeah. So to be able to talk to people, and then for them to be able to show me genuine photographs of, well, this is exactly what Price's laboratory looked like.
Yeah.
And then I could just copy what his laboratory looked like and animate little elements in the foreground. But for us to know that was it, that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
And to have decent views of the rectory, and so that I could put a camera in different places and animate it from different views, but ultimately that I'd know that it would be roughly right, it would feel right. It wouldn't just very obviously be some other building. It was, no, that's what Borley Rectory would have looked like in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, you can't, it was so important, their contribution was so important to it. I would have really struggled with so much of it.
Yeah. As I say, I've read their book and I know their work, and guys, check that out as well. Again, I'll share the link to that particular book in the chat room for you, so you know what we're talking about, because it is a very, very good piece of work in its own right to do with Borley. Now, Ashley, we're coming to the end of the show. I'm going to ask, if you could, your next project, I know you're still wrapped up a little bit with Borley, what ones would you like to tackle? There must be others.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of things which, because originally Borley Rectory was just going to be a short film. And it was only as I started working on the script and more interesting people got on board, people like Reese and Jonathan Rigby, Claire and Annabelle, all these different people came on board. So I started writing bigger, better scenes for them, and that's how it grew to feature length. Mm-hmm. But I'd actually written treatments for and rough drafts of scripts, other features already. And there were two. There was one which was Spring Hill Jack. I really wanted to do a Victorian Gothic horror, almost with Spring Hill Jack, a little bit like a kind of a proto, those sinister kind of superhero type character, but very very much still rooted in the Fortean world and mysteries and grave robbing and all that kind of stuff. So very, very kind of Victorian. And the other one was I wanted to do a fun little thing called Hell Tour, which was going to be a portmanteau film made up completely of Dartmoor ghost stories.
Oh, wow.
And they were all going to be genuine Dartmoor ghost stories. I did the research and wrote up little versions of the scripts. And it was going to be like one of those old 70s Amicus films, where you have a bridging story at the beginning, at the end, which in this case was going to be the hairy hands, and he'd find himself holed up in the Warren Inn right in the heart of Dartmoor, and you'd hear these different stories. So it was going to be quite a very traditional piece of cinema in a way, but at the same time, the fact that the stories were all going to be completely local to Dartmoor and Devon ghost stories, which I thought would make it a bit different. So that's still, waiting in the wings.
So you're not going to be getting bored anytime soon, I think.
Probably not.
So Ashley, if people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you? What's your website, Twitter, Facebook, all those usuals?
Ouija board only.
Ouija board only.
I've just got to try and remember my Twitter thing. Twitter is Carrion Screamin'. So Carrion as in crow, and then Screamin' as in screaming without the G. So that's the Twitter. And I've got a website which is carrionfilms.co.uk. But we've also got Carrion Films also got a Facebook page, and we try to keep that updated as much as possible in between everything else that we have to do.
Oh yes, it's all that side of things that's important too, isn't it?
It is, and it's incredible actually, because people do expect that you've got a team. If you produce anything at all, that you've got a team of people. And as wonderful as it is to maintain that illusion that I'm sat there in this big glass office, in a big chair and a big desk, with 40 people working for me in another room, it really isn't the case. It's myself, Tom, and a few other people that help us out with some of the admin. It's a tiny unit of people that are just making it for the love of it, really. So, but we try to keep it up to date as much as possible.
So, guys, go and check those sites out. Again, I'll share all the links into the chat room for you so you can find Ashley very easily. And all I can say at this point is we've come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for spending the time to talk to me. I know you're incredibly busy. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure. It's fun chatting.
Yeah, it's really good.
Glad we finally got to do it.
I know. We've been trying to sort this out for an awful long time, and between schedules on both sides, it's been an absolute nightmare. But we've managed to do it, and it's been quite opportune because you've now finished the project and it's now out there for viewing. So it's probably the perfect time to actually get together and actually discuss this. So there's a reason for everything, I feel.
Absolutely. And now I've got a big film-shaped hole in my life.
I'm sure you'll fill that film-shaped hole very, very soon. You'll be coming to me next week going, I've actually started work on this project.
Yeah. It's going to be a trilogy.
Well, let's hope so, because I know the quality of your work and it's absolutely awesome. So you keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much once again for joining me tonight.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Don't forget, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me in the chat room. And don't forget, you can check us out on YouTube. We're on Twitter and Facebook, all the usual media, social networks that are out there. And on that note, all I've got left to say is thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week. Good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.